A happy couple, thrilled with their new home, soon notices something strange, and it all starts with their dog's unusual behavior. As the dog becomes increasingly protective and even jealous, the woman begins to feel as though she's never alone even when her husband is away. They try to brush it off, but soon, the couple realizes that something much darker is at play. When the husband calls the police, the shocking discovery they make inside their home is beyond anything they could have imagined. Curious to find out what happens next, stay tuned to uncover the terrifying truth they never saw coming. Today's story takes us to Virginia, USA, where the Stewart family had recently moved into their new home in the western part of Jill State. The family consisted of Ryan, his wife, and their loyal dog, Dogus. They were a happy trio, and every day, the couple would take turns walking Dogus, showering her with the love and care she deserved. However, in April of last year, they started noticing something unusual. Dogus began acting strangely. She lost her appetite and seemed more restless than usual. Concerned, the Stewarts assumed it might be a health issue and took their beloved dog to the vet. After a thorough examination, the vet found nothing wrong and sent Dogus back home. The couple was confused, not understanding what was happening to their pet. Since they didn't get a response from the veterinarian, they decided that perhaps the move to a new home caused stress and problems with adaptation. In addition, they noticed that the dog no longer wants to walk and play with them as before. As time went on, things only got worse. The dog didn't get better. She seemed to be declining. In addition to giving up walks, she began to spend the night without sleep and stand at the door of the master bedroom to watch them, especially his wife. Ryan didn't notice until night 2 when he realized that the pet hadn't slept at all for 2 nights in a row. A long, loyal friend of the Stewarts began to exhibit increasingly strange and disturbing behavior. It wasn't just the refusal to eat and sleep. The dog seemed obsessed with protecting Jill, Ryan's wife. The way the dog gazed at her in her sleep without looking away for a second was truly disturbing. The Stewarts tried to find a logical explanation for the management of the pet, but only found more unanswered questions. Why was the Doga so concerned about Jill? Was there something in the house that bothered her? Perhaps some intruder was wandering around. Over time, the situation only worsened. The dog refused to leave him alone, and if she needed to go somewhere, the dog became extremely anxious, desperately barking, and it was as if knowing that something bad would happen in her absence. Ryan and Jill were feeling increasingly uncomfortable and frightened by the dog's behavior but didn't know what to do. They should have taken the dog back to the vet, installed security cameras at home. They were really worried. The strange behavior of the dog only intensified by keeping them in constant tension. Lack of sleep and stress were visible on their faces as anxiety took over them. They did not know how to react to what was happening, and the lack of answers only increased despair. They searched the internet, asked neighbors and friends, but no one seemed to be able to explain what was happening to their beloved dog. But the strangest thing happened 2 weeks after the first symptoms in the dog. The couple began to hear strange sounds on the second floor of the house right above their bedroom, as if something was constantly scraping the walls. But that wasn't all. They also began to hear footsteps upstairs. The situation became puzzling as the second floor was an uninhabited space unfamiliar to them. They just got a duplicate key for the second floor door, since they've never been there. The one who sold the house to them said that the second floor only had old furniture and belongings from the previous owners, so they hadn't shown any interest in it until now. Soon the dog's behavior became even more intense. One Saturday night, she barked at the same time and whined, which woke up Ryan and Jill. They realized that the dog was warning about another person in the house. The likelihood that this animal disappeared as the footsteps upstairs became louder and more insistent. Desperate at midnight Saturday in the middle of the night in a country house with no one nearby to call for help, they did the only thing they could. They called the police. They arrived in about 15 minutes. The police asked Jill and Ryan a lot of questions, which they quickly answered. Having told about the behavior of the dog and about what they heard upstairs, the police immediately went to the second floor and kicked out the door. What they found shocked them. The police soon found evidence that someone had lived there for a long time. Leftover food gave them away. No one was there at the time. Perhaps the noise of the police alerted them, and they fled before they were found. The situation was alarming because it soon became clear that it was a group of people illegally living on the second floor of the house. They looked for completely abandoned houses in order to force them to move in and live for free without paying rent, utility taxes. But this was just the tip of the iceberg. The police followed their trail and found out that they were part of a dangerous criminal gang that not only settled in abandoned houses but also robbed the place, tying the tenants so that they could not call the police while the bandits took all the valuables. It is very likely that this group, living in the Stewart's house without their knowledge, was waiting for the right moment to make their move. Jill was overcome with fear and disbelief upon hearing the news. How could they be so naive not to notice that something was wrong in their house for weeks? Their dog barked incessantly, trying to warn of danger on the second floor, but they ignored it. Fear seized them, and they could not bear the thought of returning to this house after what had happened. It seemed to them that someone was constantly watching them. Their privacy and tranquility were violated. They could only hope that the police would be able to catch these criminals before it was too late. And then the police began their pursuit of this dangerous gang. The cops knew that these intruders were common burglars, so it would be easy to trap them to capture the gang. The police decided to use the Stewart's house as bait and place a few civilian agents in the nearby woods to keep them undetected. They knew that if the house was left unguarded, the thieves would soon return. Indeed, 2 days later the gang returned, this time more cautious and disguised. They made sure that there was no one in the house. Looking around its edges, not noticing anyone, they entered in triumph to rob everything they could. And then the first Vorov entered the house and realized that the door was not locked, and the house was surrounded by policemen at the back, who drove up in vans ready to raid. The police chief drove up in a car and grabbed 6 criminals at once. Some tried to escape, others surrendered and waited to be chained. Jill and Ryan, who had been living in temporary housing all this time, were finally able to breathe a sigh of relief, seeing that the criminals were behind bars and no longer a threat. The help of the police was key in order for this couple to regain their safety and tranquility. But of course, one cannot underestimate the merits of the real hero of this story, a dog who, thanks to her canine instincts, from the very beginning realized that her family was in danger and tried to protect them as best she could. Another example of what a dog is capable of for the sake of his family.